I met my ex-husband around March 4, 2020, on a Facebook dating site and matched with him on Hinge. I did not realize he was on both platforms under two different names. One was his actual name, and the other was a variation, a nickname, with different pictures. It became a running joke between us that I did not recognize we matched on Hinge. This should have been a red flag. In this story, I refer to it as the United Nations of red flags, as there were numerous warning signs I ignored. You might think I was oblivious for overlooking them. We met around March 4th and exchanged phone numbers. He called me, and we spoke for the first time. In that initial phone call, he shared that he had recently moved to Georgia from San Diego, California. His job transferred him as the new regional manager for a major condiment company based in Georgia. I will not disclose the company's name. We discussed his childhood. He said he grew up in Philadelphia. Both of his parents were deceased, as he stated in the first call. His father was a Philadelphia police officer, and his mother was a teacher. He mentioned briefly living in Augusta with his family. He had 2 brothers, 2 sisters, and 2 half-brothers on his father's side. This was all shared in our first phone call, providing backstory. We talked about family, friends, and our jobs. At the time, I worked at the Georgia State Patrol, which he found impressive. He remarked on my daily work with troopers, which I confirmed. In that call, he shared that he used to play football, specifically arena football. I know nothing about arena football, only the NFL and college football. He explained his involvement in arena football and that he worked at Apple during the off-season. I thought it was commendable, though I admitted my ignorance about arena football. This detail will be relevant later. He mentioned he had just moved to Georgia, with his job covering his housing. They were assisting him in finding a house. He was in Gwinnett County but wanted to find a house in Atlanta, ideally in Brookhaven or Sandy Springs. I found it admirable that he was house hunting after relocating. He noted he knew few people in Georgia, spending most of his time at work due to a demanding job. That was our first phone call. We continued talking, and he spoke extensively, which surprised me, as I am not accustomed to men talking more than me. He asked me out on a date, set for Saturday, March 7, 2020. He inquired about my favorite restaurant, and I chose the Cheesecake Factory. We agreed to meet at the Cheesecake Factory at a location midway between us. I lived in Clayton County, and he lived in Gwinnett County, about 45 minutes apart. We chose the Cheesecake Factory at Perimeter Mall in the Sandy Springs-Dunwoody area. I was excited and called my friends to share that I had a date, hoping it would go well. The first conversation was promising, and I hoped he resembled his pictures, a common concern with online dating. On my way to our date, I took Interstate 285. Right before the Boulder Crest exit, I heard a loud noise and lost control of my car. I managed to avoid a crash, but my tire had blown out. I called him, apologizing, explaining that my tire blew on 285. I was slowly exiting and pulled into a Chevron gas station. I expressed uncertainty about what to do, dressed in a Zondist dress. He paused briefly, then asked me to send my exact location. I sent the pin, and he arrived at the gas station. I was relieved that he matched his pictures and found him attractive, standing at 6 feet 4 inches or 6 feet 5 inches. I must revisit our first conversation to add a detail. He disclosed in that call that he was divorced. His ex-wife had 2 children, a teenage boy and a young adult girl, about 20 years old. He claimed a close relationship with his stepchildren. He and his ex-wife divorced because she cheated on him in California. Moving to Georgia was a fresh start for him. His ex-wife and stepchildren remained in California. He expressed disdain for her but a desire to remain in the children's lives. This detail will be significant later. This sets the stage. Our first conversation covered family, jobs, friends, and his relocation to Georgia. These are typical topics for an initial conversation. Returning to the tire incident, he arrived at the gas station. He changed my tire, which I found incredibly appealing. He suggested a nearby tire shop, as I could not drive far on the spare. He followed me to the tire shop and paid for a new tire. I was impressed by his actions. The vibe was positive, so we proceeded to the Cheesecake Factory at Perimeter Mall. We held hands walking into the restaurant, which gave me butterflies. That was the demeanor of a woman enchanted. There was a long wait, so we sat outside and talked. The conversation was engaging, and he shared his intentions. He was 42 at the time and expressed a desire to marry for real. He said his parents were married over 40 years before his mother's passing, and he wanted that. He sought marriage, a family, and a home. As a man, he was ready to marry but wanted it to be genuine, as his ex-wife's infidelity had hurt him. He shared everything I wanted to hear. He asked what I wanted, and I replied similarly. I was ready to marry, desired a family, and wanted to marry my best friend. We both agreed we sought marriage. We had established we were dating for marriage, not casually or for temporary benefits. The dinner at Cheesecake Factory went exceptionally well. We laughed, joked, and discussed people, which aligned with my sense of humor. It was a pleasant experience. At the end of dinner, we sat in his car, and he played a song by John Legend. I cannot recall the song's name, but I will include it in the video description. The song's lyrics suggested meeting his future wife that night, which I interpreted as a sign. I was deeply moved by this gesture. We continued talking in the car about life and experiences until midnight. During this conversation, he elaborated on his life in California. He attended San Diego State and played football there. He enjoyed life in California and chose to stay. He joined the company during his time there. He also played arena football for 2 or 3 years. He claimed his arena football team won a championship. I was unaware arena football had championships, as I know little about it. He seemed slightly offended when I mentioned this, emphasizing they did have championships and he was on the team. He discussed his work at Apple in the IT department, specifically in store. I did not pay close attention to this detail, similar to when I mentioned my past work at Amazon. We delved into his past marriage because I asked questions. He did not volunteer this information. I sought to understand his readiness for a relationship. I become uneasy when men frequently discuss their ex-partners, but that was not the case here. I asked questions to determine if he was over his ex-wife or still attached. We discussed my past relationships, which was a mistake. I mentioned dating someone I worked with previously, a detail that will resurface later. He appeared unbothered, stating it was before our relationship. The conversation was productive, and at midnight, I returned home. I did go home that night. We continued talking extensively. Our first date was March 7th, and within 2.5 weeks, Governor Brian Kemp announced a lockdown in Georgia. During those 2.5 weeks, we communicated daily. We went out again to Red Lobster, and everything was progressing well. The challenge was deciding where to quarantine. We debated quarantining at his place, which was a studio apartment. His living situation was clearly temporary, as he was looking for a house. He showed me an email from a company employee on maternity leave. She was connecting him with a realtor to find a townhome or single-family house. I concluded his studio was temporary, as he did not intend to stay long-term. The email apologized for not arranging housing before his arrival. I read the email and confirmed its contents. We decided whether to quarantine at his studio or my house. Inviting him to my home was a mistake, among others. During one of our dates in those 2 weeks, we saw each other frequently. There was no physical intimacy, just 2 people exploring a potential relationship. He visited my house, where I lived in a 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath townhome. He resided in his studio. I share this in the order events occurred, including my thoughts and errors. I did not realize inviting him to my home likely made him view me as a desirable partner. He saw my spacious townhome compared to his small studio. He likely decided to pursue the relationship to quarantine at my place. We chose to quarantine at my house. When the state went into lockdown, he stayed with me in my home. Initially, everything was fine. I hesitate because I grew up in a church environment. I faced an internal struggle, having vowed never to live with a man unless he was my husband. Now, I was living with a man who was not my husband. This conflicted with my upbringing and values. I ask for understanding, as this reflects how I was raised. It did not sit well with me, but I did not want to quarantine alone. I made the decision to proceed. He moved in, and we discussed finances. I must clarify a previous statement about him paying all bills. He paid all household bills, including rent, which was under $1,000, and utilities. He did not cover my car payment, phone, or car insurance. He claimed to be a regional manager, suggesting financial stability. I was impressed by his ability to cover these expenses. My income was solely for personal expenses. This may not reflect well on me, but it is the truth. Not worrying about household bills was an exhilarating feeling. I overlooked the fact that we were cohabitating without marriage. I justified it because he handled all household expenses for April before the month began. This occurred in March. We lived together, and I cooked and cleaned. He assisted with cooking and cleaning. We discussed whether he would buy a house for himself or for us. We aimed to make the relationship official, marry, and start a family. The question arose about our next steps. I did not want to remain in Riverdale, Georgia, or raise a family there. I refused to have a child in Clayton County. We decided to look for a house together. He was already house hunting for himself. He stated that since we were together and he planned to marry me, we should find a family home for both of us. He disclosed the amount he was approved for, showing me Chase paperwork. The letter, bearing the Chase emblem, stated he was approved for a $700,000 mortgage.